On the surface, as a philosophy, individualism doesn't sound immediately bad. It is the idea that the individual should have control of themselves in all situations and at all costs. It is the idea that the wishes of the individual should supersede those of the government or wider society. It's the basis of the "don't tread on me" mentality. And the idea that no one should control or coerce you isn't inherently problematic, but the issues with the uniquely American breed of individualism are manifold. For one, the promises it makes are a lie. Under a capitalist hierarchy, the individual has no real freedom over how they work, what they wear, what they do, where they live, what they eat, etc. Everything is determined by their income level, and therefore usually by their employer. An individual cannot claim to be free of outside influences when they must shave their beard or straighten their hair just to maintain their employment and thus their access to their basic needs. There is no spirit of individualism within the workplace, where we are forced to spend most of our time. The idea that we get to choose what happens to us and what we do is wholly a myth for the working class, who are constantly beholden to the capitalist class. So that leads us to the second issue. The only realm over which an individual can claim any actual control is in social spaces, where the consequences aren't tied to their ability to survive. These are the people who refuse to wear masks, because they believe no one should be able to make that choice for them, even though refusing to wear one in public endangers others who did not choose to be in that danger just to buy groceries. And it's true that no one should be coerced into wearing anything, which is why accommodations like curbside pickup or contactless delivery are essential. But that's not what they mean. What they mean is they feel they have the right to do as they please, no matter the cost to others, or which choices their actions deprive others of. A person may claim correctly that no entity should dictate what substances they consume, but that right gets murkier when they want to drive their car under the influence. Then it's not simply a question of their rights over their bodies, but they also see it as their right to endanger others, because it suits them. This is where we start to see the myth of individualism break down, because society is not simply stacks of totally separate individuals. We are connected within a community. Our actions affect each other. Studies have shown that folks fully immersed in the individualist mindset actually experience smaller, less satisfying support networks, less ability to regulate their emotions or respond appropriately to others' emotions, less willingness to seek help from loved ones for personal or emotional problems, and increased levels of hopelessness and suicidal ideation. Falling for the myth of individualism means cutting yourself off from your community psychologically and physically. It achieves none of the things it promises. It does not afford the individual autonomy over their lives, because the wider capitalist society does not allow for such autonomy. It weakens connections between actual supports, and it encourages selfish and short-sighted behaviors. Individualism doesn't really represent allegiance to your own freedom. It represents a willingness to endure oppression by the state and/or by corporate entities if you're able to exert some small amount of power over your local communities. By refusing to wear a mask in a pandemic, by insisting on driving drunk, by refusing to engage in common courtesies like correctly gendering someone or holding a door open or cleaning a public space when you're done using it. It eschews all personal responsibility in favor of self-motivated preferences. Individualism also feeds you the lie that human beings can be totally self-sufficient. We can't. We are communal by nature, and whether you realize it or not, you're depending on others all the time. Someone had to plant, tend, harvest, package, ship, stock, and distribute those bags of rice and beans doomsday preppers like to hoard. Someone had to sew the clothes they wear. Someone had to build their house or other shelters. Someone had to produce or harvest the raw materials necessary to create the materials they need to build those shelters. Someone had to build the roads they drive on. Someone had to create the medicine they need when they get sick. There is no such thing as a totally self-sufficient human. We all rely on each other, and on society in small or big ways. Even if you personally possessed every skill necessary to grow, harvest, create, etc., every single thing you could possibly need, there are not enough hours in the day to do everything a human being needs to survive all by yourself. Unless you want to completely reduce your lifestyle to woodland hermiting, you need society. You are dependent on others. Even in the hermit example, most folks still aren't going to make their own knives or guns for hunting, or grow their own fibers to harvest and then sew into clothes or housing materials, or mine the metals necessary to make the needle they need to sew those clothes. American individualism is a toxic stain on the human psyche. It is a lie created to trick the masses into subservience as long as they maintain the illusion of independence. It's saying, sure, I can barely make enough to survive and I pay more taxes than literal billionaires, but no one can make me be kind to others and therefore I am free. And it's bitterly ironic that staunch individualists will rage against every leftist reform that would give them even a taste of the freedom they pretend not wearing a mask represents. They don't want billionaires to pay a fair share of taxes to provide housing, food, healthcare, education, and infrastructure that they need to have the freedom of self-determination, because even though those people make more money than the human mind can actually conceptualize, they see themselves in the billionaire's place. When we talk about redistributing the 1%'s wealth, they have a knee-jerk reaction that basically amounts to, hey, you can't take my stuff! The individualist mindset makes them see everything in black and white. Taking $100 from a poor person is seen as the same as taking $10 million from a billionaire. The nuance between robbing someone of their ability to eat that week versus taking an amount of money that will have literally zero impact on a billionaire's life is completely lost. Separate, but a supporting factor of the bane of individualism, is the fair world myth. The idea that good things happen if you work for them, and bad things only happen if you deserve it. So billionaires deserve their wealth because if they hadn't earned it, they wouldn't have it. And the impoverished deserve to suffer because if they hadn't done anything wrong, it wouldn't be happening to them. The idea that any person at any time can fundamentally change their material conditions if they just do the work. This is the myth that individualism thrives on. The idea that each person is solely responsible for everything that happens to them means that I shouldn't have to change my behavior to protect anyone else, because if something bad happens to them, it was their fault and not mine. Obviously, the fair world myth is just that, a myth. We know a myriad of factors, including environmental, economic, physical ability, racial bias, and more, affect a person's status in life, and most become locked in with little chance of upward mobility without significant privilege or proximity to others' wealth. Individualism stares so hard at a single tree that it cannot see the forest that houses and sustains that tree. This is one of the ways progress is resisted. The idea that our needs should be provided for us, that it is not the individual responsibility of each person to struggle to survive, flies in the face of the individualist mentality. They blame the poor person for being poor, the sick person for being sick, the unemployed person for being unemployed, the disabled person for having limitations. They see any change that requires wealth distribution to be a direct affront to their personal individualism, even when that redistribution would help them. They can't see it that way. Their minds are clouded by the fixation on self-reliance, which again, isn't a real trait of humanity, nor physically possible. It's a perversion of our actual nature. Everyone relies on each other, if not in small ways, then in the big ways. We rely on each other to look both ways before plunging our cars into traffic. We rely on each other to do our individual jobs, be it farming or sewing or healing or transporting or whatever. We need each other to be healthy and accommodated and capable of playing our roles within society. Individualism is a culture of people who have no real ability for self-determination, but have been tricked into believing that rejecting societal responsibilities is the same as real independence. They don't bat an eye when they have to work 50-hour weeks with no benefits, because their boss is free to decide how to run their business. And that oddly comforts them, because they really believe if they stay dedicated to a joyless grind and play by all the rules, then they will achieve a level of wealth that will grant them real self-determination. So they don't want to see even a shred of progress against the super rich, because that means all their hard work is for naught. It means we're stealing their goalpost out from under them, instead of seeing the reality that such changes will actually allow them to be free.